Cassidy. Our names are
Tori Bar-Shalom,
Jenna Lachman,
and Cassidy, Lancaster.
We are students from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, studying abroad at Gustolab International Food Systems and Sustainability in Rome, Italy.
This video is created for our Food and Media course.
The main purpose of this video is to emphasize the 10th Sustainable Development Goal of reduced inequality.
The main focus of this goal is to reduce the inequalities within and among countries.
This goal is extremely important as inequality affects everyone across the world.
Inequalities continue to persist globally based on income, gender, race, ethnicity, class, disability, sexual orientation, religion, and opportunity.
It's important to combat inequality as it threatens the world's development. This is because inequality threatens long-term social and economic development while also making it difficult to reduce poverty.
Inequality is also damaging on an individual level since it damages people's self-worth, esteem, and sense of fulfillment. This leads to greater problems of crime, disease, and even environmental harm.
The most significant problem that arises from inequality is that it inhibits us from achieving sustainable development and a better planet. It is crucial that inequality and prosperity are given to every individual regardless of their demographics. In order for nations to grow and flourish, each person needs to be self-sufficient.
In order to reduce inequality within and among countries, the United Nations has defined several targets they want to achieve.
The first goal targets one of the largest inequalities the world faces, income.
Majority of the world's health is in the hands of a very small group of people, around 1% to be more exact. This is because the world's richest 10% earns up to 40% of the total global income.
This disparity is incredibly detrimental to the world as it often leads to financial and social discrimination. It also helps widen and reinforce other inequalities such as gender, race, and disability within countries.
It is very evident that income inequality is a severe global problem and that it is continuously on the rise.
The United Nations decided to measure income growth by tracking the average annual growth rate of incomes, or consumption of people in the bottom 40% of a given country.
Their overall goal through 2030 is to progressively achieve and sustain income growth of the bottom 40% of the population at a rate higher than the national average.
This goal is a good way to jumpstart closing the large gap between income and populations.
After targeting global income, the UN's second target is to promote social, economic, and political inclusion.
The UN is helping to take away the barriers that refrain people from economic, social, and political freedom.
This goal is important to address as this goal affects people all over the world. For instance, as mentioned by the United Nations Development Program, at the current rate of progress, the World Economic Forum says it will take 217 years to close the gender gap in employment opportunities and pay. Women all over the world face barriers that exclude them from important parts of society, just due to their gender.
The UN is helping to fight this, and many other instances of exclusion. By 2030, their goal is to empower and promote the social, economic, and political inclusion of all, irrespective of age, sex, disability, race, ethnicity, origin, religion, or economic or other status.
Some of their plans to empower and promote inclusion is through anti-discrimination movements, combating racism and xenophobia, and committing to economic, social, and cultural human rights.
After reducing universal social, economic, and political inclusion, the UN wants to end discrimination and to ensure equal opportunities for all.
In order to achieve this goal by 2030, it is crucial to eliminate the current discriminatory laws, policies, and practices by promoting appropriate legislation, policies, and actions.
According to the UN, it is estimated that 90% of countries around the world have at least one discriminatory law in their legal frameworks.
This statistic is just one prime example of why the UN needs to address this issue.
The fourth target to lower inequality is to adopt fiscal and social policies that would promote equality.
This goal advocates for adopting fiscal, wage, and social protection policies, which would increase the progression of greater equality.
One example of a policy that creates greater equality would be the implementation of fundamental ILO labor standards and to ensure their compliance in law and practice. For instance, these labor standards include the elimination of forced labor and the abolition of child labor.
This goal is important to address as it includes the 152 million children who are victims of child labor, according to a statistic obtained from the UN.
The fifth goal of reducing inequality is to better the regulation and monitoring of global financial markets and institutions, also to reinforce the operation of these regulations.
It has been found that inequality can lead to financial crises, confirming the importance of strengthening global financial markets.
The ongoing link between rising inequality and financial crises exemplify why these goals hold relevance to the target of reducing inequality.
Also, inequality can be a determinant and early warning signal of financial instability. It was found in a study from 2016 that income inequality has the highest predictive power of financial crises among the variables that they considered.
The sixth target in reducing inequality seeks to measure the proportion of members and voting rights for developing countries and internal organizations.
A final goal was proposed from the UN stating, by 2030, we want to ensure enhanced representation and voice for developing countries in decision-making in global, international, economic, and financial institutions.
According to the UN Statistic Division's data, the proportion of members of developing countries in international organizations is 6% and lower. On the other hand, the proportion of voting rights in international organizations is 0.7% and lower. These statistics show how low involvement is for developing countries in international programs.
For these reasons, it's crucial to work towards developing countries having a voice and taking a role in global institutions.
The seventh target goal to lower inequality is to facilitate orderly, safe, regular, and responsible migration and mobility of people, including through the implementation of planned and well-managed migration policies.
According to the European Commission website, the EU has created major improvements in creating a comprehensive and fair migration policy, known as the Global Approach to Migration and Mobility.
These principles are an example of international cooperation, which follows guidelines that help lower inequality by creating responsible and well-managed partnerships with countries in order to facilitate migration in a proper procedure.
After learning about this goal and each of its targets, we were all shocked to realize the vast inequalities our world faces and the problems that arise from them.
As each of us was lucky enough to grow up in communities free from most of these harsh inequalities, it was difficult for us to imagine what life is like for people dealing with it on a daily basis.
It is important to realize that even though we don't personally face discrimination on a daily basis, that the world is interconnected. These problems of inequality find a way to trickle into the lives of everyone. Inequality isn't confined to any specific country or region.
Even the richest countries, such as the United States, still faces poverty, racism, discrimination, and more.
While studying abroad, it was easy to spot the clear indicators of inequality in each country we visited.
Exactly. For example, homelessness and poverty was a problem in every country each of us traveled to.
Inequality affects each of us no matter where we are, who we are, or where we are from.
Although it was depressing to learn this horrifying truth, it was comforting to realize that it is possible to reverse them, and there are current efforts in place.
As these efforts to reduce inequality require work on a global scale, it is often difficult to think about what we, as students studying abroad, can do to help progress this process.
However, it is possible for anyone to participate in reducing inequality if you know the right ways to get involved.
For example, the easiest way to get involved is to donate to a Goal 10 charity of your choice. Any donation helps to support reducing inequality and to make a difference.
Another way to help is to recognize inequality when it's happening and take a stand. Raising your voice against any type of discrimination is a minor step one can take in fighting inequality.
One of the issues contributing to rising inequalities is caused by lack of representation of minorities and underprivileged groups in government. Another simple way to help combat inequality is to run a voting registration education in these groups to help encourage their engagement and representation in institutions of power.
Another easy way to help is to support and favor companies that are inclusive.
As inequality is a problem that affects everyone around the globe, it is important to do your best to try and reduce it in any way possible in order to achieve a better planet for all.
Ciao ragazzi!
New York City.